Hello, and welcome to day 4 of Global Webit Impact Week. Today, the whole day is dedicated on the health innovators. Let me remind you, the past 3 days of the Global Impact Week were focused on first day on society architects, second day economic sustainers. Yesterday was dedicated to the planet guardians. Fantastic discussions, mind-blowing, new and hopefully future inventions. It was truly inspirational so far. But today is a very special day, the Health Innovators Day. There is no happiness without health. And we see that the global pandemic we were part of turned out to be also a catalyst for so much innovation in the health domain. And it is just the beginning. I think we've just opened the Pandora box, hopefully for better. And most probably, as many anthropologists and futurists say, in the next decade or even less, we shall see people becoming healthier, most probably stronger, with much more capabilities which are given to gods. Who knows? Some say immortality and longevity is going to be achieved. Others say that is a disease which we can fight. So far, this is one of the only certain things in life. And let's start from here and see how we built on. Obviously, it's a very close to my heart topic as my PhD thesis, digital innovation solutions in healthcare, particularly AI. So we will see so much of this today. And let's start without further ado. Actually, one due. I want to say how grateful I am to the whole Webit team for making this event happen. And it's a truly, truly inspirational how we've built this huge agenda, all the efforts and the passion put into building this full week of phenomenal speeches, of groundbreaking and news breaking, and having all of you 100,000 people from all around the world, coordinating over 500 speakers. Now, let me also remind you that the world's biggest startup challenge is part of the agenda of the Webit Global Impact Week. You can check the website and search for the Founders Games and see what is going on there. Now, already, without any further ado, let's talk about digital shaping the future of healthcare and our wonderful moderator from Forbes, Elisabeth Brier. Elisabeth.
All right, so good morning or afternoon or even evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name's Elisabeth Brier. I'm an assistant editor at Forbes magazine in the United States. I'm based in New York, and I'm also the founder and CEO of Mentally Aware, a new digital mental health media platform. I'm so excited to be joined today by two amazing women, Francesca Wuttke and Natalija Jovanovic. We're going to discuss how digital transformation is shaping the future of healthcare. So I want to turn it over to each of you. Thank you both so much for being here, to just introduce yourselves to the audience before we dive into our discussion. So Francesca, let's start with you.
Hi, and thanks, Elisabeth, and thanks so much for having us here. Looking forward to the discussion. I'm Francesca Wuttke. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Almirall, based in Barcelona. And my mandate is the end-to-end digital transformation of the company. So everything from back office process automation through to AI-enabled drug discovery, software-enabled clinical trial solutions, We're working on several digital therapeutics platforms, as well as providing solutions to our commercial colleagues to better interact with our patients and providers. We've also launched a digital health accelerator called the Digital Garden, where we've accelerated 10 startups so far and are about to launch our third harvest of the Digital Garden in the coming months.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And Natalija, let's hear from you.
Hi, Elisabeth. Thank you for having me, and many thanks to our organizers at Webit Week for having this chance to speak with such a broad and exciting audience. My name is Natalija Jovanovic. I am currently the Chief Digital Officer for Sanofi Pasteur, which is the vaccines division of Sanofi. And as we are in a pandemic, vaccines is a rather hot topic. My remit is similar to Francesca's. It's full end-to-end digitalization, data and analytics on everything from research and development to production of our vaccines, all the way to placement in the marketplace and ensuring that the products are safe and effective scientifically for people around the world who use them. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yes, very relevant. So, that kind of leads into my first question. We obviously can't talk about healthcare without acknowledging the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. I think it's fair to say this has turned the healthcare system completely on its head. So Natalija, I want to first know from you, what were some of the biggest challenges you, in your individual capacity and the company you work for, faced in the early days of the pandemic?
Thank you, Elisabeth. Early on in the pandemic, there was a cartoon that appeared in many publications that it was a simple multiple choice question. It said, who is defining your digital strategy? And Francesca has seen it, it seems. And it asked, is it the CIO? Is it the CEO, the chief digital officer, or is it COVID-19? And of course, COVID-19 was checked. I mean, what a tragic time to live in, but at the same time, it pointed out the opportunity to use existing digital solutions a lot more extensively than we have before. I think that the biggest challenge was that the pandemic shone the light on some of the gaps in our processes that were filled up and managed by people having in-person conversations, right? Once we all were forced to work from home, those are little things, the conversation in the hallway, the quick phone call, seeing someone coming in and out of the building from the parking lot, those proved to be really valuable interactions, but now were suddenly impossible. And so that's where digitalization really came in and plugged those holes to ensure that we can transition. So I'm curious to hear, Francesca, what it is like from your perspective.
Yeah, well, you're right. It certainly has turned everything on its head. I'm working from home today because unfortunately my family is confined, so everyone's fine. But it's something that I think 2 years ago we could never have imagined would have had such an impressive impact on all of our lives. I fully agree, Natalija. I think it's changed the way we look at almost everything in our personal and professional lives. The narrative that we're able to have now as a result, because of how easily and how readily we're all using technology, I think is completely different and has helped us accelerate tremendously in terms of digital transformation within our industry. I think also patients are utilizing digital tools in ways that they never have. And that allows us to better interact with them, but also to find solutions that they want to use. So, this idea of a patient as a consumer and an ingester of information is certainly one that I think all of us have taken very, very much to heart.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that leads to what I wanted to ask next, which is, on the flip side, while it often can sound sort of gauche to talk about the positives of the pandemic, given all of, the destruction and loss, et cetera, there's undeniably, been positives that have catalyzed certain industries. And of course, that includes healthcare. I want to hear from both of you about what you personally regard as some of the biggest achievements and breakthroughs, whether at a large scale or at your companies in particular, or both. So Francesca, I would love your thoughts first, and it's just kind of riffing off what you already said, just about what some of these like tangible achievements have been.
Yeah, I think for many in the pharma industry, it's an incredibly well-regulated industry, and despite the huge advances that the industry makes year over year, I think it's a quite risk-averse mindset. And the pandemic has shown all of us that digital and utilizing digital solutions and services is no longer a nice to have, but an absolute necessity. And that's changed the mindset. It's changed the pace of acceleration within companies, and also the willingness to try something new. For many months, being based in Europe, we were confined in Spain, and many people were confined across the continent. And there was no way to interact with patients who needed help from their physicians. So we had to very quickly pivot out of complete necessity. And many of those approaches and those channels that we put in place have persisted. I think we're all irrevocably changed because of this global pandemic. And I agree with you. I think it's important for us to find, those reasons for good and for the betterment of us as a society. And I think there are a number of approaches that we can continue on with. Telemedicine is one of them. Obviously, the telemedicine rates have gone down a bit since things have more or less stabilized across the world. But that's certainly something that I personally will continue to use. As a mother, being able to very quickly have a visit for my kids is a huge time saver. And knowing that I can get the same quality care virtually or in person is really helpful. So, I think there will be a number of things that will change. Certainly the commercial models across pharma have changed, and that change will continue. Physicians realize now they can interact quite nicely virtually, and I think the hybrid model of some in person, some virtual will continue. I think how people are ingesting information broadly via Netflix and the internet and YouTube, we're all people at heart, and whether we're people in a professional capacity or people in a personal capacity, the same holds true. So, we should think about how physicians or how patients want to ingest information and provide them with a Netflix-like approach where they can look at content whenever they have time to, and across whatever verticals they're most interested in. So content will continue to be key.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I love that Netflix analogy. I'm sure everybody who's watching can understand that. So that's a great point. Natalija, I want to hear from you too, what you think or have seen been some of like the greatest achievements and breakthroughs as a direct result from COVID-19.
I think that the adoption of telemedicine has been phenomenal, both as an individual, as a mom, as a caregiver to my parents, as well as a professional. It was just phenomenal to be able to call up a doctor, ask for a consultation, and not only that, but for the doctor to be reimbursed for that kind of help that they provide to the patients, right? So I think that the regulatory change in how we approach telemedicine has been such a positive, and I hope that much of it will remain active after the pandemic is hopefully behind us. Another one that I think is really helpful is that the general awareness of what digital solutions and what digital capabilities are available has skyrocketed, right? Before the pandemic, people would say, I don't really have to learn about AI, or I really don't have to understand how these telecommunication networks work. And then suddenly in the pandemic, that's where our life ended up residing. And so I was really impressed by how many people from all walks of life, all professions, all ages, took a chance to use this as an opportunity to bring up their digital awareness and capabilities at the same time. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing point. So moving beyond specifically COVID-19, obviously that's like the big hot topic, but there's so much more to this space. I want to talk more broadly about digital tech that we should expect to see and is necessary in shaping the imminent future of healthcare. What sort of, Natalija, you just mentioned AI. What are some applications with AI that we can expect soon? And what are some other digital innovations that we can also expect in like the imminent future?
Well, that's a great topic, and obviously one of the most exciting areas in technology nowadays. I think that what the first thing that people need to do is to understand what makes a great AI solution, right? And there are several elements. The first one is the data, right? That we need to have sufficient quantities of high quality data before an AI solution can be successful. Yes, AI is powerful, but if what we put into it is biased, incomplete, or in any other way flawed, that AI is going to very quickly come to some very wrong conclusions and recommendations, right? So the first part is, do we have the foundation of data on top of which AI can be successful? The second part is our algorithm designed in a way that, to the best of our capabilities, prevents the AI from reaching those incorrect conclusions, right? So that includes not only a high skill in computer programming, but also a high awareness of biases and a high sense of ethics in the people who are programming these AI solutions, right? And then the third part are the user interfaces, making sure that not only the great data and the great algorithm are there, but also that when people are using a particular AI solution, they have such a pleasant and easygoing experience. Because if we look at the history of software in human race, the museum of unpleasant, incomplete, or unhelpful software is completely full, and I hope we'll stop adding to it. So those to me are the three foundations that we have to always keep in mind. But some of the applications have been absolutely phenomenal. If you look at image recognition, we have reached a point in which AI is about as good as a human in recognizing certain images, and the benefit is that the AI doesn't get tired. So while a radiologist might get tired after reviewing 100 radiology slides, the AI can just keep going, right? And so image recognition for medical purposes, I think, is absolutely exciting. The other one that I find really exciting actually has to do with what you do, besides Forbes, with mental health. How can we use our communication patterns to help detect when someone is really struggling, and when we have a fellow human being who could use all the support they can get to get through a potentially highly difficult time that has been perhaps made worse by the isolation of the pandemic. So those image recognition and language processing to me are really two exciting areas.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's super exciting. I think I don't know if you guys have had direct experience with this, but I think there's a lot of sort of uneasiness around the concept of AI in general, just based on what people see in movies or, read about in certain publications. Francesca, I wonder, from innovations that you want to see in the imminent future, how does that sort of perception of AI and just kind of like futuristic tech in general kind of function in what you're trying to build and what you hope to see in the future of digital healthcare?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And Natalija mentioned ethics, and ethics has to be at the core of everything that we do as a pharmaceutical company, and that certainly extends to advanced analytics or to artificial intelligence. We have to make sure that the assumptions that we're putting in, the data that we're putting in, are appropriate and are the right ones to derive the outcomes that we want, and whether those outcomes are predictive models for illness or therapeutic areas, or looking at the potential for adverse events or potential for the success of a therapeutic product. Ethics has to really take a very, very prominent role. One other thing that I think is also really important to keep in mind is to make sure that we're getting the right clinical input. It's a tricky space because you want the data scientists, the programmers, and as you mentioned, the UX people very much involved in the process so that the outcomes are visually useful. But you also want to make sure that you're not drawing conclusions based on causality, and that the correlations are real. So having that medical, that clinical scientific input will be really important for not only maintaining and creating data sets that are clinically meaningful, but also that can be trusted by the public at large. With regard to novel innovations, Almirall is focused on medical dermatology, and the skin is an area that's obviously so visual. So the ability to offer physicians triage. I'm not suggesting that AI is going to take over the role of dermatologists or of any other medical practice, but it's certainly really useful for physicians, as an initial point of contact. And in the dermatology space, by the time a patient gets to a dermatologist, they've often bounced through other physicians within the medical service, whether they're GPs or pediatricians. So to allow physicians to have access to technologies beyond their areas of specific expertise, to give them guidance and then to decide, whether or not they need to refer a patient, I think is incredibly important and helpful to the medical community.
Yeah, I think that's like a great way to put it, and so very true. So working specifically, in the pharma space, what are kind of, and I know you've touched on them a little bit briefly in what you just said, but what are some like specific impending innovations like in that space, really pointedly, are they different from the general health tech space?
Maybe I'll jump in first here. I really see an enormous evolution in digital therapeutics, and I see this as the fourth modality of medicine. So we started with small molecules, then we went to biologics, cell and gene therapies, and now digital therapeutics allow us to provide patients with care that in some cases they're not able to access. We spoke a little bit about mental health and whether that's delivered via an AI voice recognition NLP platform, or it's a digitized cognitive behavioral therapy where you can offer software as an actual therapy. It's software as a medical device to provide care for patients and to provide more holistic care. So we've launched an initiative in collaboration with Happify Health, where we're providing mental health support for patients with severe psoriasis. About 40% of patients suffer from either severe anxiety or depression, and the idea is to treat them beyond their skin and to give them something that really improves their lives on a daily basis. So, combining a digital therapeutic with a traditional therapeutic really opens the aperture of how we can think about our patients as people rather than, as their disease.
That's like such an amazing point, because I think that's kind of a whole different approach to understanding what it means to have holistic healthcare that I think a lot of people don't think about. Natalija, do you have thoughts on that specifically in regards to the pharma space?
Absolutely. Just like we've discussed so far, there is so much more to wellness and well-being than booking an appointment with a doctor or taking a particular blood test or taking a particular medication. That this is where digital can be the proverbial village that all of us need in order to fully function. And yes, many of us still rely on friends and family members for that kind of support, but we also all live further apart. We also all have much more stress and intensity in our jobs and obligations than we've had before. So I don't see digital replacing anyone at any time in the future, but I see it as a useful augmentation or addition to how we manage our wellness. And at Sanofi, we have similar initiatives, such as what was mentioned by Francesca, and it tries to really complement all of the medical offerings that exist on one hand, but on the other hand, also help the medical professional take better care of a patient by having more access to information. For example, we have a long-term partnership with Evidation Health, which helps us understand exactly that. It helps us understand a person beyond the medical record, and to, with that understanding, deliver solutions both to them and to their healthcare provider that help them get to wellness sooner.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that kind of touches on what I want to talk about next, which is cyber security. So obviously with all this innovation, there's more data out there and et cetera. And cybersecurity is obviously a very hot topic right now across pretty much any tech industry. But healthcare, I think people are especially wary given, a lot of personal information, et cetera. So to what extent do you think cybersecurity needs to be further developed to quell fears, or what innovations are working now that are like doing that job? Let's start with you, Francesca.
Well, I think it's something that is certainly top of mind for everyone within pharma, but it's not really that different compared to how we already operated. So, patient data is the most private and is treated as such. One thing that I think the whole industry needs to do is to gain the confidence and that of the public at large that we're using their data for the right reasons. However, I firmly believe that this is much more of a government, of a regulatory issue than it is an issue for people in their day-to-day. Because when you poll people, and many people have, many of us are quite willing to have our data pooled for the betterment of society. So it's when those individual data are used not for good that I think it causes issues and problems. But the strength of those data when pooled can be absolutely transformational for us as a society and how we treat healthcare more broadly. So,
yeah, that's a great point. Natalija, what are your thoughts on cybersecurity? Is it at the level it needs to be to, continue with innovation, or is people's sort of perhaps uneasiness around not trusting certain cybersecurity that's already in place kind of a bulwark to innovation?
It is certainly a concern. There will always be individuals, and sometimes those individuals will come into organizations as hackers trying to do damage that they either find to be in their interest financially by requiring some kind of a ransom in order to get things back to normal. And honestly, some of the hackers are doing things for fun. They have time on their hands. They have easy access to tools that can create quite a bit of a mess in someone's life or in someone's company. But what I'm encouraged by is that there seems to be an equally large number of people who are what we call white hat hackers, people who apply their skills, time, knowledge, and passion to containing the threat that may exist from the other side. And the capabilities have increased a lot on both sides, and I'm glad that we're using them to defend the legitimacy of our data, to defend access and ethical use, to defend our infrastructure from cyber attacks. It's a threat that doesn't go away, but we've had threats like that before. I mean, there was always a chance of a physical attack. There was always a chance of misinformation being circulated. So I don't think that it's anything new to humanity. As long as the historical books have been written, there have been such tactics. It's just that now both sides have much stronger tools to use for and against the different goals.
Right. And I think also, it is just something that's sort of seeped into the current lexicon that has it more top of mind for people. As you both said, we exist in this basically virtual reality now. That kind of does make me wonder, though, what would you say, if not cybersecurity, what are some of your biggest barriers to executing digital innovations that you see as necessary or, really helpful? Is it regulatory issues? Is it just tech not being advanced enough? Or what would you say are some of like the biggest obstacles you need to overcome? And since I'm already looking at you, I'll start with you, Natalija, but I would love your perspective as well, Francesca.
Thanks, Elisabeth. I have quite a few of those, and I don't want to take up all the time. I don't think that the underlying technology capabilities are an issue. There is actually a beautiful short talk from Ginny Rometty, who used to be the IBM CEO, about what are the hurdles to innovation. In this short conversation, she describes that technology can do a lot of things. We just have to get our act together to use it in the right way for the right benefit, right? So to me, one of the hurdles is that while the technology exists there, it still needs to be programmed to do a certain thing, right? And unfortunately, in healthcare, we are not at the level of understanding health mechanisms to the degree that allows us to program it, right? For example, take how a chemical interacts with its surrounding, especially if it's a protein. Proteins are extremely complex, right? We don't quite yet understand what makes a protein fold a certain way in a certain environment. So if we don't understand it, we have hypotheses, we have things that work and things that don't. But if we don't fully understand it, we can't program a machine to do much about it, right? The second one is that we need highly developed ways of working, right? When you go to any organization, I'm not speaking about my organization specifically, but if you go to any organization, you often find, do you have a process for this? And people will answer yes, right? Are there exceptions to this process? People will say yes, right? So long as there are exceptions, it's again hard to program a machine to navigate a certain process or a certain amount of information. Another thing that I think would help us is the critical mass of people who not only understand the mechanics of AI or any other technology, but who also have exceptionally high empathy for the users, right? Elisabeth, you alluded to this before, that it has to be a phenomenal experience. It has to be something that helps a person, and we're not quite there yet. So if I could make a plea to anyone in the audience, go exercise your empathy muscles, because I think that will help you identify and deliver exceptional solutions compared to anything that anyone else might attempt. So I'll stop there and pass it to Francesca to add.
I think those are excellent points. One of the main issues, and I won't harp on the regulatory and compliance issues that are probably endemic across pharma, because I think we all know and live them. But the other issue is interoperability, because very often we have point solutions that solve for a specific issue. And we think of them as solving for our problem within whatever the business issue is. But to the empathy point you made, Natalija, which I think is brilliant, we don't often think about the patient itself and how they want to be provided with tools that help them. So if a patient has a multifactorial condition or a condition with several either side effects or comorbidities, they don't want to have to rely on 10 different tools to manage their care. Can we imagine a future where there's one interface that different aspects or different modalities can be plugged into that can offer patients more complete care? To date, in most geographies, the systems aren't integrated with the medical records. And even those medical records aren't integrated across different systems. So if a patient goes to their GP and then goes to their specialist and then goes to another specialist, those three physicians may not be aware of the totality of the patient's condition. And they may be prescribing things that could be contraindicated. Unless that's all seamlessly integrated, it's very difficult for any one particular physician to know exactly what's going on. So I think we have a very long way to go in terms of interoperability and in terms of the usability of a lot of these solutions that are at patients' and physicians' disposal. I would agree that the technology is certainly there. The regulation is not there yet in many cases, but many of the startups, because they're scrappy and because they're startups and entrepreneurial, are moving forward under the assumption that the regulation will come. It's a little bit of, we'll build it and then they'll come. And the hope is that that's the case. Going back to the digital therapeutics example I mentioned earlier, in Germany, there's a very specific law that allows for both a regulatory and a reimbursement path for digital therapeutics and allows appropriate pricing for about a year after you've started generating evidence. If something like that spreads broadly across Europe and to the US, that can provide a sort of codified methodology for a digital therapeutic to be classified, categorized, vetted, and then ultimately accepted and reimbursed. So I think more of that industry-wide needs to be done. Historically, the industry-wide consortiums haven't been great. It's been a lot of time of pharma kind of looking at their own feet. But in order to make really impactful changes to the health system and to allow these digital solutions to unburden health systems in a meaningful way, I think all of us are going to have to work together, providers, the pharma industry, medical centers, to really provide seamless care.
I think that's really well said. And I think that speaks to the humanness that is behind, all of the digital tech innovation. And that's something else I wanted to bring up. Obviously, diversity and inclusion has been something that's been talked about a lot. And I think hopefully for, everyone is something that's undeniably powerful and helpful in growing innovation and, moving forward. I want to hear from both of you specifically about its importance, diversity and inclusion's importance in the digital health space, what you've seen specifically, or your just broad sort of thoughts. And Natalija, I would love for you to share your thoughts with the audience first.
Thank you. It is such a complex topic and it has so many dimensions. And that's why I mentioned empathy first. For example, we oftentimes, if we talk about someone who is trying to manage their diabetes, we make assumptions that seem really logical from our point of view, but are actually assumptions from the patient point of view. And when we talk about digital therapeutics, we often assume that the person has a very capable smartphone in their pocket, right? And that's not the case for a lot of people. So how do we bring digital therapeutics to someone who doesn't have a smartphone, maybe still has a flip phone with texting, right? And also, how do we bring digital solutions to someone who may be from another country, speaking another language, but they live in the United States, or they've had to immigrate due to difficult conditions in their own country. And we often assume that people can read numbers. And so one simple example is that you tell someone, oh, you're managing your diabetes, this number should be under 100, right? But the person is not even used to seeing the numbers 100 in their life, right? So how do we communicate whether you're doing well or not in those environments? So I think that's why thinking about diversity first, thinking about inclusion first, will enable us to live in a completely different world in the next 10 to 20 years with respect to wellness and healthcare. And even in the tech industry, we have some assumptions about how we approach the building of the solutions, right? Forgive me if I get on a soapbox for a moment, but I take, for example, hackathons, right? Hackathon, great idea, let's do it. We're going to put people in a room, they're going to stay overnight, we're going to order pizza and we're going to order some drinks, et cetera, right? But if you really start to dissect hackathons from the DE&I perspective, you discover that they're structured in a way that excludes people who maybe need to take a break to take a medication, right? There are unfortunately people who have serious illnesses for whom taking a medication is a half-hour process, right? You have to check the numbers, you have to dose it, you have to inject yourself, you have to recover from the injection, and so on. Also, it excludes people who may have family obligations, such as nursing. Like find me a nursing mom. Well, I mean, nursing moms are great for staying up all night because they have a baby that probably stays up all night, but they need to nurse their baby, right? And if you're in an office somewhere doing a hackathon, it's creating quite a problem. It also, we have more and more elderly who we need to take care of, right? We sometimes need to be there to help them take their medication, take care of themselves. And so if you take a hackathon, you start to see how something that is so well-intentioned, such as a hackathon with a great purpose of building a solution for healthcare, actually results in some key representatives of our communities being excluded from the experience. So what I advocate for instead of hackathons is to have short workshops in a series over multiple weeks and say, okay, these 2 hours every Monday, we're going to spend working on this topic. And that way people can be included. and we can all have a break and not eat as much pizza. Back to you, Elizabeth.
That's really what we need. Francesca, what are your thoughts on the importance of D&I specifically in the digital health tech space?
So, very often I think diversity and inclusion is characterized as gender equity and as workplace equity. And I think it goes so far beyond that. I think it's when we think about D&I in the digital health space, it's about health equity. So how do we get solutions to patients who may not have appropriate access to medical care? How do we get patients input into designing a solution or designing a clinical trial, or even designing a medication itself, and when it's possible to do so, dosing schedules and things like that, or even how they choose to be supported. So increasingly we're going to the patients or the caregivers, and we're asking their opinions, we're getting their input in the design of systems and solutions, but also in the design of clinical trials and clinical practice. And I think that's so important. In digital health in particular, the diversity of thought and of ways of working, I find, have been enormously helpful in transforming pharma. When you bring startups together with seasoned pharmaceutical executives, great things happen. But it happens over time. It's very important to give people a really experiential process that they can live and work and breathe a different way of thinking. So, for me in the digital health space, bringing together disparate groups to try to solve for the same problem is really important.
Yeah, that's very well said. So my last question for you, I know we've covered a lot and have gotten to specifics about different things, but I kind of want to zoom out and talk about sort of what is your company's or just general visions for the coming decades, and what are your predictions for the future of healthcare and the pharma industries on a more global scale and in like the more distant future? Natalija, I'd love to hear your thoughts first.
Thank you. It reminds me of a psychology research paper that I read a long time ago, which it was a meta study of a bunch of studies that asked itself, how good are humans at predicting what will happen at different intervals of time? And it turns out that humans are actually pretty good at predicting, or we're much better at predicting what will happen in the next 2 to 3 years than we are at predicting what will happen beyond the 5-year mark, let alone 10 or 20 years, because so much changes. We just don't have enough awareness about what has changed in order to predict it solidly. But I'm hoping for really continued growth of human connectivity, such as what we saw with the adoption of telemedicine. We live in such a continuously evolving world, and our best chances of adapting to it is if we all take that road together. Francesca, what do you think?
Well, I agree. And I think after the last 2 years or so of trying to predict anything or plan for anything in light of COVID, I throw my hands up. But I do hope that we're able to get to a place where we can unburden our health systems. Patients can feel that they're really well looked after, leveraging the technological solutions that exist or will exist at the time, and that we think about patient care and wellness and the importance of outcomes in a much more systematized way, and capture those data. And then over time, we amass incredible amounts of knowledge that can then improve how we think about medicine.
Yeah, I love that. Well said from both of you. I think that is our time, but I want to thank you both so much for being part of this. I love this discussion, and it's great to see, all this great innovation that's happening and have some amazing women at the top. I love to see it. So I think that's where we end, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.